All right, everybody. This is basically going to be the complete guide for setting up your Node.js backend projects. So you have your application, right? You've been able to get your front end developer, or you've been able to develop the front end yourself. Having the designs and everything working, and then now you want to be able to create like some kind of database or a system whereby your services can be constant. You can actually add some special functionality, some superpowers to your project, on the front end, right? One of the ways you can do it is by having a Node.js backend, or is by having a backend in general. People build backends in different ways, obviously, and one of the ways is having a Node.js backend. Now, me personally, I use the mern stack for most of my projects. So, mern stack being the mongodb, React, Express, and Node.js, right? And at the end of the day, I use Express and Node.js. So I basically use Express as my Node.js framework. Do you get me? At the end of the day, to help me build my backend a whole lot easier, right? And faster, right? Now, some people decide to build their backends with TypeScript. Some people also decide to build with JavaScript. But I decided to build with JavaScript personally because, coding time is a lot faster. But yeah, and some people also decide to use TypeScript. It depends on the person, right? So basically, I'm just going to explain, or I'm just going to teach how to build your personal your how to build a backend basically with Express framework and Node.js, right? Now, what we need to understand is, first of all, we need to set up our project, right? So this is the first part. The first part is going to help us. In the first part, I'm going to teach how to set up the project, right? So what we want to do first of all is, let's say you are building two projects, right? You can make a directory, so you can have your client folder, and you can also have your server folder, right? So you have these two folders here, right? Now you can do whatever you want to do in your client, you can do whatever you want to do in your server. In certain companies, in certain companies you would have the backend in a different repository and then the client in a different repository, and you guys will be communicating together. But usually when it comes to personal projects, you don't want to be working like that, because at the end of the day you want to be switching between these two different sections of the application, right? Because most of us are full stack developers, so um, that's usually the case for us, right? So I'm just going to delete both of these directories. I just wanted to use this to explain something to you so you can understand what is basically going on, right? So I'm just going to delete this. I'm going to delete the client, and I'm going to delete the server, right? And I'm just going to treat the root directory as my main server, right? So let's just clear the terminal. I'm going to press Ctrl L to clear it. You can also type clear to clear, but yeah. So basically, what we want to do is, there are two ways we can basically initialize our Express app, right? Now we want to make sure that we've installed Express by typing in npm I express -g, right? And then it installs Express globally. But I've done that already. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to type in Express, and let's say you want to use a specific view template. You want to use view and then EJS, or view, then you have handlebars. It depends, right? But since I use EJS, this is the command that I use most of the time, right? But I'm not going to use the Express generator right now, because we want to be able to understand most of the things that we are doing from scratch. So basically, let us start by doing npm init -y, and then we press enter, and then that is basically going to give us our packet.json file inside the root directory, right? So now that we have a packet.json, we want to make sure that we are installing certain packages, right? Now, what are some of the packages that we want to be installing? Now we want to install, so we're going to say npm I or npm install, it depends. Then we're going to say we need node. But why do we need node? We need node so that whenever we start our server, we wouldn't whenever we start a server, we wouldn't have to close the terminal and restart it again. Let me see if I can explain. Okay, so I'll basically explain along the line the reason why we need node now, right? So basically, when you use just node, right, and then you run your server, and your server is supposed to console log something, or your server is supposed to log something in the console, at the end of the day, it just logs them once, and you don't seem to see the changes in case your code changes, right? That's why you need node now, basically. And then secondly, we're going to install express, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to be listening to our server on a certain port, so we can communicate with the front end from the back end, right? Now, what else do we want to install? We want to make sure we are installing the body parser, because at the end of the day, we'll be passing in values to the body so that we can create and we can update data in the database, basically. And in case we want to be using cookies to handle stuff like authentication and all those things, we can also install the cookie parser. And then as we all know, the HTTP requests are very vulnerable, right? So at the end of the day, you want to have something that can protect the HTTP request. Now, for you to be able to have something to protect the HTTP request, you need helmet. Okay. Yes. So at the end of the day, this is what we can have at the moment, just to set our project up, and then along the line, as we be building our API to understand how things work, we would tend to install more things, and then we would understand along the line. So yes. So I'm just going to skip this part of the video just so that it would install, and then when we get back, we just go to right. So we have body parser, cookie parser, express, helmet, and mevn installed. Now what we want to do is, I want to create my server file here. That's the root file here. So I want to say touch server.js, right? I could use server.js. I could use index.js. A lot of people like to use index.js, but I decided to use server.js. I just like it. So I'm just going to go into the server, and what we want to do is we want to require certain packages, right? Some people tend to use ES modules. So basically, ES modules is the one that most of the time you see used in most frameworks like React. I use React personally, so I've seen it in React. I don't know about the other ones, right? So I'm going to say that, so if I say import, so let's say I want to import express from express, right? If I say import express from express, you'd realize I would get an error, right? Because at the end of the day, I've not specified over here that I want the type to be an ES module, right? So it's not gotten automatically, right? So what I want to do is, if I want to use ES module, I'm going to come here, and then I'm going to put in type, and then I'll say what it's a module, right? And then I wouldn't get an error here, right? So, but I don't want that. I personally just want the, oh, I messed something up. Yes, okay, cool. So basically, I just want to use common here. So I'm going to say const express should be equal to require express, basically. Now require express, right? Now that we have express, we want to say that const app should be what? Const app should be the initialization of your express application, right? So I'm going to say express, then I'm going to initialize express, right? Now what we want to do next is we want to listen for our server at a certain port, right? So we want to say app.listen. Now where are we listening? We are listening on port 3000, and we want to write a function, an arrow function here. You can write a function, you can use normal function or arrow function, depends, but I prefer arrow function. So we want to log, so what do we want to log? To the server is running on port 3000, right? Now that we have this, there's one more thing that we need to install, right? So let's say we want to keep in some secret values, secret files. We want to come and say npm i.env, right? Now, while .env installs, I would want to explain this start script that I was talking about. So, say we are now listening for our server at port 3000, right? And then we want to run it to see the changes that are being made. I'm just going to change the start script here. I'm going to change it to start, and then I'm going to say that I'm just going to say node, right? I'm just going to say node. I'm going to say node server.js, right? Then I'm going to say npm start, right? So as you can see here, npm start, it's running, the server is running on port 3000. Now if I make any changes here, right, if I say port 4000, right, we don't see the changes being made in the server, which obviously would make development a whole lot slow and difficult, and unsatisfactory. So what we want to do is we want to use the node one that we put in here, right? So let me just close the server by doing Control C to close the server, and then I would replace this node with node mern. So now when I say npm start, it is going to run with node mern and listen for changes. So when I come and change this to 4000, you see the changes being listened to, and it changes it from 3000 to 4000 basically. So let me change it back to 3000. It's obviously 3000. So I remember I mentioned something about the env, right? So some people prefer not to put in the port here. They prefer to store the port in an env file just to protect it from whoever wants to access, just to protect it basically. So for security reasons, right? So because of that, we want to import our .env package, right? So we want to say const.env. Const.env is going to be require .env. So we're going to require .env. I'm going to require .env package, and then the next thing is we are going to have to initialize the package before we can use it, right? So we're going to say .env.config, right? Then yes, we should now be able to use our env files here. So in order for us to be able to put this port 3000 into a safe place or in the port, we are going to do this. We are going to create an env file here. So we're going to say .env, right? And then this .env file is going to have a port 3000, right? And then inside here we are going to put process. We're going to put in process.env port, the variable name in here, right? So you can see that it still took it from here, 3000. Now we can use an operator to check if it's true, and if it's not true, it just logs out something else. So I would say for 4000, just in case we don't get 3000 from the port, obviously. Okay, so now that we've been able to keep the value of our port inside our env file, what we want to do is we want to log out the ports inside the server so that we know the port that is being used at the moment, right? So what we can do right now is we can clean this and then use the string concatenation method. Now we want to first of all bring our backticks, right? Now inside the backticks we can say that the server is running on ports. Then here we bring our $sign and then our curly braces. Then we put in process.env.ports. Or 4000, right? So if we go here and we clean this, we should see 4,000. Let me save. We should see 4,000, right? But when we put it back in here, we should see 3,000 when I save here, right? So this is one thing to do. So basically, this whole tutorial is basically here to teach you how simple it is to set up your server or your Node.js Express server on the backend. This is just a setup. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for the ones that come.